What's up, Poppy friends, and welcome to my video vlog for the month of July, walking through what I worked on in June, and then what I've got planned for the month or two, I guess, ahead. So, two big things or two big projects I worked on for June. First, the big one that I did on the long weekend that just passed was to actually do a room swap for my studio, which I'll walk you through in a moment, as well as working on my first two Shatterpoint strike teams, so I actually start playing the game. So I'll walk you through the new studio tour. I think that's a little bit more of the exciting news, and then I'll walk through the actual miniatures and my hobby progress. So the big reason for the room swap, this room actually used to be the bedroom for my girlfriend and I, and she wanted to use what was my previous studio room, a much larger room, as the bedroom. And so we agreed to do a room swap. I ended up having to move everything, repaint this room. It was originally all white walls. I went for the exact same color scheme. So I used platinum for the off-white walls. And then I used a color called Little Black Dress. Both are from Bear, I believe is the color brand. Both matte. I really like the color palette, and I think the off black really helps to anchor the wall, and then particularly as my workstation and hobby space. For me, it just makes the room feel a lot bigger and a lot more polished, and then I can sort of mount everything on there, and it feels less cluttered, even though I have all this stuff on the wall. So unlike the previous room layout that had the desks back to back, because of the size of the room and the fact that this L shape only has one configuration, I did end up having to put both desks back against the wall. So I'm not a huge fan of this. I do prefer having the desks back to back. It helps to separate my workspace from my hobby space. It also means that in terms of mounting all of the cables and mounting all of my recording equipment and all of my computer hardware, I do end up having to run cables further along the distance, especially for my recording stuff. If you can actually see back here, I had to get an extra power bar mounted there for an interim step. And then my cables back here are a little bit of a disaster, but from back here, you can't really see it, so it's not a big deal. Moving over, I have my bookshelves and my display cabinets. Display cabinets, same as always. I do like the fact that I now have a bigger view around them. I can see behind them, see everything behind. It gets a lot more natural light, so the cabinets are well lit. The bookshelves I ended up doing back to back. So on the front here, because I do use this as the backdrop for my webcam at work. So whenever we do video conferences or meetings, this is my backdrop. So I wanted to have a much more polished bookcase. So I have my display cabinets here, or my display carrying case from tableware. I've got all of my gaming books, my codexes, my rules, things like that. It just feels a little bit more polished in terms of a backdrop. If I walk around to the back here, the other bookcase is actually used for all of my hobbying supplies. A little bit messier and not something I wanted as the backdrop for my video calls. So that was the reason for the split. Instead, what I did, and one of the advantages to this particular layout I'm really enjoying, I have a much larger pegboard mounted behind and directly above my painting workspace. Rather than having to constantly walk back to a shelf behind me to grab hobbying supplies, I'm now able to mount everything that I use on a regular basis right on the pegboard. It actually means I can just stand up, grab what I need, and continue working. So I think for the workflow, this layout is actually much more conducive to a productive hobby space as opposed to having to interrupt my flow to get up, grab a supply, and come back. So what I've got here on this hobby shelf is just materials and supplies for projects I don't use very often or don't require as much. Typically, they're just basic materials. I've got some sculpting materials here, tools, masking tape, all my airbrushing supplies. I've still got my box of shame here, which I'm managing pretty well, not including the Shatterpoint stuff, or I think 1 or 2 Seraphon kits. This is pretty much everything I have that's still unpainted. And then just 3D printed stuff and glue, etc. I did lose the 3D printing station. So my 3D printer and the actual cleaning station have now been moved to another room. And I did end up having to give up the big desk as well, which I was using primarily for my photo station. So instead, what I did was I jury-rigged a portable makeshift photo station. I've got the backdrop clipped to a bar that runs across, and I've got the lights mounted on there as well. Hey, Google, turn on photo lights. So you can see that.
Turning on the photo lights.
So you can see that functionally it's the same. I get the backdrop. I can take my photos. I can set up whenever I need. The lights being mounted to the backdrop actually makes the entire thing much more easy to move. So if I ever have to do a move, again, moving the studio to a different layout, or if we move to a different apartment or end up buying a house at some point, this entire photo setup is a lot more portable. And it means I'm not tied to having a specific wall in a specific spot to actually have the photo booth set up. My original plan was to actually have the cat tree in this position so my cats could sleep on it, look out the window, and then have the photo station set up on this wall. But the wall space isn't wide enough for the curtain to really be wall mounted. I think only about 2/3 of it. But more importantly, there is the single air vent for this room down here, which actually kind of sucks. And if I had the cat tree on top of it, I would get no air circulation in this room at all. So I ended up just doing this, and yeah, I've got some photo stuff I still have to sort through. One other advantage to this room as well, advantage, disadvantage. So the layout of this house, this direction is east-west, so I believe east is behind me, and this is west. North-south, and the old studio room would have been the room adjacent to this. So that room never actually got any sun, which meant that my cats never actually got any sunlight during the day if they were in the room and lounging, which they usually were because, as a tangent, so I have two cats, Charles and Jonesy, and then my girlfriend has a dog and a cat, and they don't get along. So my two cats don't like her cat doesn't like Charles, her dog doesn't like these two cats, and they get angsty around us. We have to keep them separated. So during the day, they are with me in my studio when I'm working, which means that they never get any sun until the afternoon when we let them out and we do sort of a room swap with the animals. Yeah, they were constantly just living in the gray, dark, overcast world, especially in the wintertime. So this room getting sun, especially in the afternoon, is actually a huge plus for them because the sun, of course, east to west, does set here. So from noon onwards, they get a lot more of that sunlight. The downside to that is because there's only one vent for airflow, and because my own computer generates a lot of heat, this room does get fairly warm in the afternoon. So at some point, I either have to turn my computer off or drop the blackout curtain a little bit just to reduce some of that glare coming in, reduce some of the heat. In terms of the reason for the layout of the room, so I actually played around with a couple of versions to see what I would or wouldn't like. The desk positions were pretty much locked in. So as I mentioned, because of this L shape, it only goes together one way. This is pretty much the only corner that this desk can go on. It's either that one or that one. The two desks almost always have to be side by side because of it. And with one to have both the bookcases and the display cabinets in the room, having the L shape against this wall meant that I would actually have to block the window with either the bookcases or the display cabinets. So pretty much the desks are locked into this position. I wanted to make sure I had the white desk in the room for photo station as well as some other uses, and which pretty much left the bookcases and the cabinets as either going up against that wall and jutting out in sort of an L shape, or display cabinets against the back wall, one bookcase and one bookcase against that wall between the doors. I ended up settling on doing a dividing wall in the middle of the room, and my thinking was to essentially force a bit of a narrower entrance to the room, create a bit of a space separation here, and then as you enter, the room sort of opens up into a bigger space. I think in combination with sort of the blacker wall and the way that it opens up, it sort of makes the space feel a little bit larger, a bit more open. And then as you enter it, it's sort of creating a separation in terms of an environment for me. In terms of miniature projects, I pretty much focused on working on Shatterpoint. I wanted to have 2 playable squads or strike teams. I always mix up the terminology. I think it's squads are the individual units, and then the strike team is the entire thing put together. So I wanted to have 2 painted squads to be able to play a fully painted game of Shatterpoint with. So I painted up twice the pride, so Dooku, Jango, and both the Magna Guard. And then I painted up Ventress, Kalani, and the B1 Battle Droids. I'm playing or focusing on Separatists for now. I wanted to have the droids and the beep boops. I will get to the Republic eventually, but right now, because I want to play the baddies, that's what I'm focusing on. I also play a lot of good guy teams in Marvel, hence the reason why I wanted to be Separatists in Shatterpoint. The Twice the Pride tutorials, so Dooku, Jango, and the Magna Guard will be going up on Patreon for July. The video is edited. I just need to render the full-length one and then cut it apart into the 3 separate videos to upload, hopefully this weekend. So this video is coming out July 7th. So hopefully July, by 8 or 9, the Patreon videos will be ready to upload. It'll take a few days for them to process on YouTube, and then I can put them up on Patreon. And then I've recorded the videos for Kalani, the B1s, and Ventress. Them, along with the widgets, will go up on YouTube for the month of July, and then probably leading into August. So I'll probably do the widgets, and then I'll have Ventress or Kalani, and then I'll have the battle droids. Or maybe the droids in Kalani, and then Ventress in August. Either way, those are next. And then I'm finally at a point where I'm now caught up post-Adepticon, and I'm able to start painting and recording videos in advance. So especially for my patrons, thank you for putting up with sort of the delays in getting out the previous video. The Slan, I know, ended up being released at the end of the month because of the delays in getting that model painted. My plan for Patreon for August will be painting Darth Maul, Gar Saxon, and the Dark Commandos. So I do have a Marvel commission to finish up in the first half of the month for July, and then I can start working on those guys in the end of the month. Yep, that's it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I apologize for the shaky cam, but I felt that it was the best way to record the studio room without too much effort. Hopefully my next vlog will be back to a stabilized, fixed talking head position. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe for more awesome weekly content. If you want to check out my other social media platforms, I'll have links in the video description below. And as always, until next time, happy hobbying. Also, I can see why people do the top-down angle. Bottom-up is not flattering at all. Thanks.